Today we're going to be messing around with S-curves. First thing I'm going to do in my project is double check my color management settings. And where do we put them? Well, this is what I do, and I'm going to be showing you what I do. This is what this is all about, my approach. It doesn't mean it's the way you have to do it, but this is the way I like to do it. I feel like I have a lot more control, and I really believe in the Davinci Resolve system and the color management that they've developed. It's pretty spot on. And it makes my job a lot easier. So, Davinci YRGB color managed is what I like. So I'm going to put that in. And my color processing mode is HDR, Davinci wide gamut, intermediate. Output color space. I have a grading monitor calibrated to Rec 709 2.4, so that is what I'm going to keep it at. That's kind of a default setting as well, so if you're not really sure what to do, put it on Rec 709 gamut 2.4 and you should be good. All right, now this clip here, since we're doing S-curves, I wanted to find footage of a human being trying to mimic an S-curve. I felt that was important for the lesson. So this individual is doing some sort of a strange, bizarre, potentially slightly show-offy abdominal workout. And this was captured on a Blackmagic camera. So I'm going to, what I just did here, I'm in the media tab. And I'm going to right click on that footage. I'm going over to the input color space. And it's a Blackmagic 4.6. So let's see, I'm going to guess it's Gen 3. That looks close enough. Okay, so we have our transfer. Sportswear, what are these gals up to? This footage is from ArtGrid. Sometimes I forget which camera and color space the clips are that I download footage from, so I have to go back and just click on them and it will tell me Arri Alexa Mini. Okay, that's great. So I'm going to switch this one over to the input color space of Arri Log C3. All right, looking good, ladies. What else do I want to use here? Woman reading a book. This one as well. Lots of good stuff happening today. The old lass is just out for a walk in the grass. Okay. I'm going to move that over. So I'm going to highlight all the clips that I want to use. If I can. There we go. And I'm going to right click, create new timeline, curving. And I also want to change a couple settings here. So I'm going to work in 1920 by 1080. I want my scaling. I have different revolutions here, different resolutions and different aspect ratios. So if there's going to be any letterboxing on the top or bottom of any of the images, I want Resolve to automatically zoom the clip in until the letterboxing has been removed. So I'm going to go down to mismatched resolution and I'm going to go scale full frame with crop, create. Now let's open that. And I'll just show you all of my clips are now completely filling the frame. S-curves, so many things that you can do with them. Now that we have our timeline all set up, let's head on over to the color tab. Which clip, how do we balance this one? You know what, just for fun, we're going to leave this one. Let's go to our curvy ab lady. And this is all about curves. So everything looks, relatively white balanced well enough. So what I want to do is just dive right into it. So down here at the bottom of your screen, go to your curves, this guy here, and then custom curves. And we're going to make sure that we have all of these linked YRGB, like so. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a little bit of compression. So I'm going to drag the shadows up Let me pull up my waveform. So I'm dragging the shadows up and I'm thinking I want my black point to be around, I'd say 15% on the waveform. If that doesn't make sense to you, I have my waveform scale style set to percentage. Okay, now highlights. I want to bring these highlights down, down, down. Probably to around, oh my goodness, I would say 75%. And now in the ellipsis here, we're going to hit editable splines. And I'm going to bring, starting from the highlight side, I'm going to drag this spline, start creating a little S-curve here. And I'm going to move it a little past the middle and just bump up that middle there. Just a nice spike of luminance. And I want to be monitoring my exposure. So I've created a new node by hitting Option S. I'm going to do it again. Option S. And on that node, I'm going to add a false color plugin. And now my settings for the false color plugin, drop down, creative, and then under color bands, creative style, we're going to select exposure guide. Now, selecting the first node again, I'm going to move this spline until the skin on her back is not peaking. See that red? We don't want that. I want the skin, the brightest skin, to be pink there. So I'm going to stop. Oh boy. I'm going to move to around there. And now I'm going down to the shadows. And I'm going to drag this out towards the center, really creating a curvy S bottom there. And I'm watching the shadows. I don't want them to go into purple. Purple's too intense. Let's see how we've done so far. We're doing well. We're doing quite well. I'm going to bring it a little more here. I'm going to go back up to the highlights. Bring those in a little more. Okay, now I'm going to take off my false color. We're going to look at where we're at. So now you can see the image, the luminance of the image on the waveform is living in a more compressed area, and that's what compression is all about. And so now it's kind of a softer look. Our shadows are brighter, our whites are dimmer, and all the action and activity is happening in the midtones. So what we want to do now to mess around with the midtones with our curves, we're going to select our first node. We're going to keep the false color node always at the end of the tree because we want to see the measurement after all of the adjustments have been applied. So first node, I'm hitting Option S. So this first one, I'm going to call this compression contrast. Okay, second node. What I want to do now, I want to slightly boost the mids a little bit and then add contrast in the midtones. So how am I going to do that? So let's go down to our curves. Same curves that we've been working with. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select my eyedrop qualifier here. I'm going to highlight it over her skin. And I'm just going to see where that indicator, okay, so this is where the darkest skin is kind of living. So I want to kind of add contrast probably around this area here. So I'm going to reset that. And now I'm going to add a few anchors here. And now I'm going to start boosting up a little bit of contrast. Don't want to overdo it. When you do these minute curve adjustments, I always find it's really easy to make a big mistake. Wait. So I'm turning my editable splines off because it's easier to do the type of adjustment that I would like to do right now. Okay. So let's bring that up again. I'm going to activate my false color. So I'm looking at my false color. I don't want the skin to go too bright. See the red came in? I'm going to pull back. And now I'm making a little tiny S curve within the S curve. Insert inception joke here. Now look at that. See how we're just popping the highlights a little? Well, the mid-tone highlights a little bit more. It's just making the dynamics of this image a little bit more exciting. I'm just going to play that back and make sure it looks decent. And it does. I'm happy. So that is creating a little bit of mid-tone contrast after a little bit of compression. Perhaps we want to apply a creative tone using our curves. So that's all experimentation. It's about pulling colors out, pushing colors in, and just kind of finding a place that you're excited to be. So let's select the red curve here. And what you need to know about the curves here when you have one individually selected, if you are adding in red, you're taking away from something else. So if we're pulling out, let's pull up the vector scope so we can know what we're talking about. And just in case I forget, it'll make it sound like I know what I'm doing. So red, I'm pulling out red. And what is that doing? Look, it's going to the opposite end of where the red value is on the vector scope, which is cyan. So look, I add red, I go towards red, I pull it away, going towards cyan. Very interesting, right? Let's try green. Oops, so green, oops, get out of here, get out of here. So if I push green up, we're going towards the green indicator there. And if I pull it away, I'm going to magenta. So that is kind of like your tint slider right there. And now let's try blue. Hello, blue. Where's blue? Okay, so if we push in blue, where are we going to go? We're going to go towards blue. That's a great guess. And if I pull away from blue, look at that. We're bringing in a nasty yellow. So very interesting what you can do with these. The important thing to remember, and this goes for any and all color adjustments that you are making as a colorist, you want to be very subtle. It's so easy to overdo this stuff. Like blue. Terrible. But if you make a minute adjustment, you can keep things looking relatively real, but with a little bit of flair. So much you can do. So why don't we take a look at, I'm going to reset that. One thing that I love to do is to bring a little bit of blues into the shadows. So hold on, we're going to label this node mid contrast. This third node, let's call this, right click, node label, blue shads. Okay, blue shadows. So this is relatively simple. Let's take a look. We're going to use our qualifier again. I'm going to drag it over something that appears to be in the shadows and look where that is lying. So right about here on our curve. And so you can select your anchors, set them, and then just pull up on the section of luminance value that you want to affect. So just bringing in a little bit of blue. The curves are wonderful. It's such an easy way to get an interesting effect quickly. Like, look at this. Off, on. That right there, I love. I think that's wonderful. I might even want to counter that with a little bit of a complementary boost in the, let's look. Okay, this is one thing that really will help you as a colorist is whenever you are trying to get a complementary color tone happening, and you know that you have, for example, made the image bluer, look on the vector scope here And whatever color is kind of dominating your image, try to go to the opposite end. So we're kind of like yellows here, but you probably want to stay more orangey red. It just looks a little bit nicer. Yellow is not really one of the, well, it's a very nice, happy color, but it's not always the sexiest color to use, especially for a shot like this, S-curve lady. Yellow is probably not the direction to go in. So I'm going to go more orangey, red, caffeinated colors, arousing, exciting. So let's bring in, now in the mids, we're going to add some of the red. You know, so let's add a new node here. We're going to call this warmth. And I'm taking my qualifier. I'm going to go over the brightest part of the skin and just see where that lies, right about there. And now I want to set anchors around that region. And I'm just going to boost up ever so slightly. The reds there. And I'll be honest with you, I don't like that at all. So what I'm going to do instead with this warmth, I'm going to leave a very tiny adjustment there that almost is irrelevant. And I'm going to go down to I'm going to be selected on the warmth. I'm going to hit Option P, making a parallel node here. And I'm going to take my red curve, drag it over a couple points, take my green curve, drag it over a couple points there. I'm watching my vector scope. I want to be in a skin tone region. And the blue, I'm just manipulating while paying attention to skin. Look at this. When I hover the qualifier over the skin tone, I can see where it corresponds on the vector scope. And as I'm moving these curves around, I want to make sure that my skin is still in a healthy area. So let's see what we got here. Now this is nice. I'm going to see about, getting rid of some of the yellow here. So I'm going to go back to green. I'm just going to take out a little bit of green, ever so slightly. Taking out a little bit of red down near the bottom there, down near the shadows. Okay, now just to see where we've come from where we started. So we've got a little bit of a look going on. There's still detail in the shadows. It's nice and soft. This one's good for now. Why don't we jump over to, we're going to jump over to this gal here, because this is an interesting clip, because I also want to experiment with something really quickly known as the depth map. But first, how's our white balance here? Not bad. I'm going to do a little bit of a balance with the curves. Now I need to go into the red direction a little bit more. So I'm going to go to my red curve here, and I'm just going to move this, dragging the point at the highs, dragging it not all the way, just a little bit left. And then green, I'm going to bring that just a little left. And now blue, bring that down, and I'm going to go back to green. Let's see. before, after. So just adding a little bit of warmth there. Okay. Lovely. Why don't we add some cinematic blacks here? So to do that, we're creating a new node. We've got our custom curves, and I'm going to link everything here. So YRGB is linked. And there's a little link button here that you can activate that. And I'm not going to do much else other than select the waveform monitor here because I'm looking at the black point here. Now on the actual curve itself, down near the bottom, look where my mouse is. I'm going to add a little anchor there. And I'm going to drag it all the way down and see how the curve kind of snaps. I'm going to stop right before it snaps and then start to drag out towards the right until I'm somewhere pleasing to the eye. I don't want to overdo this. Just a nice cinematic black. And now I want to add a little softness in the sky, so I'm going to create an anchor right about here. Drag that up a little bit. I have this OCD thing where I like to have the dots and indicators lying on the intersecting points of the grid. But now I'm going to pull down this top area. Let me just fix my anchor a little bit there. Okay, so we've taken down the brightness in the sky and we've added some nice cinematic blacks. So now I want to take a look at creating a depth map. I'm just going to shorten this clip a little bit. We don't need it to be as long as it is. How about that? Because what I'm about to do is a little bit CPU intensive and I do not want to murder my computer. Okay, I'm going to add a little saturation here too. Very cool. Okay, so new node here. And I'm going to type in my effects depth map. And I'm going to pull that over. Beautiful. Okay. And now what Resolve has done relatively quickly is analyze the clip, and it's determining layers within the 2D image and trying to resolve which layers, which parts of the image lie in layers that are closer to the camera and which layers are further away. And so the closer layers are going to be represented by white being the closest, and then it fades all the way down through bright to dark gray, all the way to black being the furthest point. Now I'm going to go over to my settings in the inspector here, and I'm going to hit the quality drop down and go to faster because that will just allow for real-time adjustments. Now, just to show you what this is actually going to do and how it affects your color adjustments, I'm going to create a new node here. I'm going to go back to the depth map, deselect depth map preview. And now on the depth map node, I'm going to take the alpha output here and go into the alpha input of the fourth node. And we are going to add in some red. So what we can see by doing this, if we go back to, or if we hit Shift H, we can see which parts of the image in the depth map are actually being activated for us to work with. And so it appears that the brightest points, so the more forward areas, are being affected while everything in the back, the further away layers, all the way faded to black, are being affected less and less and less. And you can control the intensity and the threshold for which parts are being affected in this depth map. So let's turn that off. I'm going to go back to the depth mode preview here. And if you go down to the resulting map adjustment and hit adjust map levels, you can actually tweak the far point and the near point. So this is what happened. Now I made it so the red is only falling over her and the grass right in the same plane that she's walking on. And look at this. If we select our depth map and we adjust the far limit, you can see when we put the far limit to 0, the correction kind of fades all the way back. And our near limit, if we go to 0, it's pretty much affecting the whole image. But this should give you an idea of how the depth map actually works. And you can further isolate by turning on isolation here. And that essentially will just make it so you are affecting a much more specific area. Like look at that thin line there. So this is the region that you'll be affecting. So if you need to make a very finite, specific adjustment, you can turn on isolation. And post-processing will just help you kind of finesse the map that has been automatically generated by Resolve. I mean, once you're happy with the depth map preview or setup that you have, go to quality and set that back to better. And then you can render out. But it's going to be a little difficult to work in better quality depending on the setup that you have. But something that I might want to do if I was using a depth map, let's just restart this. So I want to isolate the adjustment that I'm about to make so that it does not hit my main character here. I want it to happen behind her. So the elements right now that are highlighted in the brighter colors, that is what is being affected. So because I want to play with what is behind her, I'm going to select invert. And I'm just going to mess with that a little bit until she's a little bit darker. There. That's good. And gamma is kind of like softness. Okay, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to turn off the depth map preview. Why is that a tongue twister? And now let's bring in, what are we going to do? Let's try doing a lens blur. So we bring in a lens blur. Notice how everything has gone blurry. But now let's bring in our alpha output into the alpha input. And notice we get our girl back. I'm just going to adjust the near limit here until it looks like we just have a typical bokeh situation happening. Bokeh. And look at that. So that's one use case, or maybe say if you want to put fog behind her or any kind of adjustment. One more with the curves really quickly. I'm going to start out with my custom curves all linked together, YRGB. I'm going to do a heavy compression because compression makes me very happy. And now I'm going to create contrast. Specifically, in the skin, the mids rather. Now I'm just dropping down in the same node. I'm using the offset. Look at that. That's kind of cool. Just playing around. I find curves to be very experimental. It's very easy to push it way too far. I do love the curves. It's not my go-to. Like, I'm a major proponent for print light keys. It's just kind of old school, and I just feel very secure about making adjustments in that way. But I feel like the potential, if you master curves, is probably a little bit further. That's interesting. Let's bring in a little bit of a look. So I want to bring in some blue, now red. Just a little. And what are we going to do with green? Green is gross. All right. There we go. Nice little look here. I think I need to make it a little more cinematic. So I'm going to create, I'm going to select the first node and then hit Shift S. And I'm just using my exposure, my offset slider here. I'm going to go all the way down until, let's make our false color at the end of the node tree, because I want to examine the exposure with you. Okay, first node, I want the skin to have the brightest point as being pink on that false color indicator. That's what I like. Interesting look here. Let's go back to our curves. We want to bring in a little bit of warmth. Let's go to our red. Oops. Go to our red. Now our green in the same area. I'm going to bring up the vector scope here because I want to pay attention to skin tones. Skin tones must be accurate. Shoot. There we go. So just messing around. So you can do some really interesting stuff here. Again, not my go-to. It's just not where I usually decide to dive in and make creative choices or, play around too much with the curves. But there is so much potential. Everybody grades in a different way, and there are many, many ways to get to the same result. But I mean, the curves are fun. And I really do believe if you really learned them, really had a lot of experience. I think photographers, I'm just speculating, but I tend to believe that photographers who work a lot in Photoshop seem to have a little bit better understanding of how to achieve the looks that they desire by using the custom curves, the YRGB curves. You could too, if you practice. So that's fun. And so that's it. That's curves. That's we've made some cinematic blacks. We've done some compression, and we've done some mid-tone contrast. And that is S curves. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.